Brandon Aiyuk gets into it with another teammate. Why is this dude so spicy? We got our man on the ground, Rohan Chakravarthi, to give us the latest updates, not only on the Aiyuk situation, but everything that's been going on in training camp. Make sure you tune in. Here we go. What is up, fam? Thank you so much for tuning in to So Real Sports Talk TV. I am your host, So Real Sunil. It is Wednesday, so you know we got my little brother, Rohan Chakravarthi, to the side of me. And guess what? He is live from the 49ers locker room, as you can see. That is totally real, guys. That is not CGI. That is not green screen. He is literally there right now, Rohan. How is it feeling being in the locker room right now?
I feel blessed. Life's good. I feel blessed. But, Neil, we took a week off, and now we're back at it. Thank you. Obviously, it's been a great knowing you. But now that I'm in the locker room, I think we've got to cut ties. I got to say goodbye.
You big timing me already, bro. You big time. This dude gets a few days in training camp. This dude gets a few days in training camp, getting live reports coming out. Everybody's tuning into his Twitter and his live streams. Now he's big timing me. Okay, I see how it is, Rohan.
Nah, it's all love. You know how it is. How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, but that attitude is a great segue into what I wanted to talk about right now, because Brandon Aiyuk reported earlier that he got into it with fellow teammate Fred Warner a few days ago. And based off of Instagram, him and Jimmy Ward are having a lighthearted feud as well. So, Rohan, I know you're on the floor there. Tell me, one, what do you think about this new attitude from Brandon Aiyuk? And on the field, is he backing it up with his play?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, Brandon Aiyuk, that fight was amazing to watch live. You know, I have not been at a training camp before this one, and so to see that fight live, that was just wild. I'll just break the fight down, see what happened, and then I'll go into the thoughts. First, there were two brawls yesterday. First one was after an incompletion. Brandon Aiyuk was catching a pass from Lance. And then after the play, took exception to Fred Warner, essentially pestering him, just trying to knock the ball out of his hands pretty much. Them two were chirping at it, going back to the line of scrimmage, and then just tackled each other pretty much. Went down. It was they tackled each other to the ground, and they had to be separated. 6 plays later, literally 6 plays later, Fred Warner, after Trey Lance gets sacked, continues to play, throws a 6-yard out to Marcus Johnson. Fred Warner, after the pretty much play is over, Fred Warner, though, goes and lays the boom on backup receiver Marcus Johnson. Brandon Aiyuk's like, nah, you ain't going to do that to my receiver. He goes up and he just squares up with Fred Warner, and them two go after it for the second time in practice. Practice was longer yesterday, but, it's fun. And a lot of people, I'm not condoning the fighting, right? I don't think that it's necessarily always good. Because obviously it's the same locker room going at it, necessarily not joint practices going at it. But this is good leadership from Brandon Aiyuk. Brandon Aiyuk is not a vocal leader. Trey Lance has said it himself. And so to see Brandon Aiyuk not only step up on the field with his play, but to also step up on the field in other ways, because he said after practice, he was just trying to drive a spark with the offense, right? Because this is a play that just gets you fired up as an offense. And the offense had its best day, coincidentally, on the same day that this incident happened. So to me, I liked it. because it showed leadership from Brandon Aiyuk. And also, I'm fine with Fred Warner doing as he did. I mean, obviously, you don't want players to get injured, but I'm fine with Fred Warner, going after Brandon Aiyuk in a way, pestering him, pushing him, because Brandon Aiyuk seems really motivated right now. He's the best player by far on offense so far to start camp. He's been phenomenal all around. So it was a good, great play, and I really like this new attitude for Brandon Aiyuk, challenging his teammates, being challenged by his teammates, because I see Swan Song saying it. Aiyuk told Jimmy Ward today on Instagram, respect me, I'm going to respect you, but try me, little bro, and we going to have issues. I mean, obviously.
That's funny calling the person that's been on the team the longest, which is Jimmy Ward, and calling him little bro. How you go, little bro? Somebody that's been in the league as long as.
That's like me calling you little bro. You know
All right. I love it. But before you go in, Rohan, real quick, I know it probably got broken up pretty quick, but if you had to pick a winner or loser, who won the fight?
I'm going BA. He's the one who stood up for his teammate. I mean, I forget. I think it's Fred Warner that's done like jiu-jitsu or something like that. But I'll just go with BA because he stood up for his teammate. But to be honest, there was just a flurry of other players that got in. So it wasn't obviously no winner really that much. It got broken up quick, like you said. But I'll go BA just because I'm riding BA all offseason so far, just based on how he's playing.
Got you. And Swan Song cleared it. He didn't call Jimmy Ward little bro. He said, don't little bro me. Thank you, Swan Song, for letting us know. But absolutely. And I mean, that's been kind of what we've been hearing out of training camp is just Brandon Aiyuk has been playing a lot better. We saw it, a different level of accountability when he was first doing the interviews in that first I guess, access to the players this offseason. Brandon Aiyuk talked about how he understood now being the leader in the locker room at the wide receiver room. He understood maybe some of his behaviors from his first and second year in the league. He understands now why the coaching staff maybe went in on him a little bit harder and how he's taking accountability and being more of that leader. That's clearly what you're talking about as well, as far as him showing more of a presence out there through his actions, through his level of play. We all know he's been working really, really hard with Trey Lance this offseason, as far as them being the two that have been working the closest together throughout the offseason. And also, Rohan, I think both you and I picked him as one of our biggest breakout players of this year, because usually that third year is where, we saw Debo last year's third year. He had his best season. And, a lot of people are expecting Brandon Aiyuk to have a really big season, not only because, now he's maybe figured out the position a little bit more and his abilities, but also the change in quarterback really gives him more firepower, as he is usually the deep option compared to, some of the other receivers. So can you tell us, because I know they did some one-on-ones and I saw you tweet about it, tell us a little bit more specifically of what you're seeing from Brandon Aiyuk and why it's so easy for you to say he's been the best player on offense.
Yeah, and real quick, before I start on the one-on-ones, just real quick adding to what you said, Brandon Aiyuk is going into his third year, but the other part about his development that people don't necessarily always think about, what's happened with Brandon Aiyuk over the last couple of years? First of all, his rookie season was a COVID year, so he didn't have a right offseason. Second year, he expected a different offseason than the one was happening, because the COVID offseasons and regular offseasons are so different, where you will legitimately battle in regular offseasons and maybe don't get the chance as much in COVID offseasons. So this is his first true offseason where he's fully competing. And so that's why I think this offseason is huge for him. And just speaking now on the one-on-ones real quick, Aiyuk hasn't lost. He's dominant. He has gone up against the best talent. It's not like he's going against weak talent. He's gone up against Travis Ward. He's gone up against Jimmy Ward twice. And he went up against Jimmy Ward, beat him deep, and he is the best channel on YouTube. Y'all better subscribe to this. Y'all better subscribe.
That's my best friend. What up, Austin? That's one of the biggest Philadelphia Eagles fans in the world right there, Austin Eldridge.
Which is beautiful, because right on the topic of Brandon Aiyuk, his biggest highlight of his career is jumping over a Philadelphia Eagles player into the end zone. So you're welcome, Austin. But Aiyuk has won all of his one-on-one reps. He's been the most consistent winner, and it's not because of luck. He's consistently beaten his guys, and it's Travarius Ward and Jimmy Ward. He's not going up against no number 2 cornerbacks he's not going up against backups. He's going up against the top-tier talent, and he's winning. Today, he had a great route on Travarius Ward. That was the best part. And then on top of that, he beat Jimmy Ward twice. That's what Jimmy Ward talked about in his press conference. Aiyuk, I've yet to beat him, and I want to beat him, but he's been doing amazing. He's the best player opposite of Bosa, and so not only is he dominating on not only is dominating on the field, he's dominating in the part that matters a lot when especially for receivers when you don't get as much time, and that's in the one-on-one game against the best of the best.
That's great, and I mean, as far as Rohan, I know you watch, the games pretty closely. Where has Brandon Aiyuk's game maybe developed the most? Is it more in the route running? Have you seen maybe some physical changes to him? Is it, his elevation and eyeballing it, or is it just like he's just gotten maybe better across the board?
Oh, it's by far contested catches. Aiyuk has always been a very fluid route runner. That's never been his issue. But the ability to piece it all together, the route running on top of the contested catch ability, on top of keeping both feet in the air, it's all just there. And he's had multiple contested catches this offseason. He's continuously found a way to get open. And I mean, there are routes where, it's great coverage. So you can't necessarily blame it because there's a safety on top. So you can't necessarily blame it. But Aiyuk has always been a great route runner. To this year, he's really pieced it together with the contested catches.
I love it. It's Swan Song. Get Sunil to 1K so I could donate the 1 cent. I love you, Swan Song. I would love to accept your chump change, brother. I would love to accept it. Let's see who else is. Swan Song also says Aiyuk has the best hands on the team, and I thought that before this camp. Seems like he's proven that, right, Rohan?
Yeah, he hasn't really dropped passes. That's not been an issue with Aiyuk. He's really had a good job. Like you've always heard about drop issues. Last year, obviously, the one thing with Deebo Samuel that you had heard that was a negative was the drop issues. Then Jawan Jennings this offseason has kind of been that guy with the drop issues so far. But Aiyuk has just had surefire hands. He's been winning, and when the ball is on target, you have a 75% chance that Aiyuk is going to catch it.
I love it. And speaking of Aiyuk playing well, obviously the guy throwing him the ball the most is going to be Trey Lance. And, we've been hearing different reports, Rohan, about Trey Lance. Some reports have shown that he's been struggling a little bit with his accuracy. He's thrown, quite a few interceptions on certain days. And then we also get the reports of him just being able to wow people with his, ability, with his athleticism, with his arm strength, arm talent as well. You're on the floor. You're on the ground. You're watching it day after day. Give us a Trey Lance progress report. Are the reports of him struggling true, overblown, or where would you grade him as far as what you've seen from him day after day?
Yeah, so I'm not a huge grades guy, right? But if we were to see and evaluate, the one point that I've been really stressing when I talk about Trey Lance, because I hate numbers right now. I'm the biggest numbers fan, and I hate the numbers. But when you talk about it, context is so important. Day one, Trey Lance threw 9 of 11. Swan Song just said it. That was not his best day. I 9 of 11, cool. But the reason was because it was such a small install that it was a bunch of checkdowns and a bunch of flats. And it's good that Lance is hitting those, but they were low or high percentage throws. So you expect him to hit it. I thought his best day was honestly when he threw 8 of 15. 53% completion percentage. Are you kidding me? That's what people tell me. But when you talk about it, overall, here's what the progress report is. Just really basing it off all the practices. Trey Lance is a scarily accurate deep thrower. Today was a bit different from the status quo. He wasn't as accurate deep, hence the 1 of 7 in regular scrimmage. But overall, in the status quo, Trey Lance has been a very good deep ball thrower. I'd put his completion percentage at above 50%, or around 50%. But I'd say really, if we're talking pure accuracy, 75% of Trey Lance's deep throws so far, or 70%, somewhere around that 2/3 range, have been accurate. And that's very good for an offense that had struggled to really master that deep pass before. Now, where Trey Lance is struggling is in the other areas. He's in the intermediate field. Lance has thrown passes behind receivers. He's also thrown passes a little in front of receivers. So it's all about just getting the accuracy down in those areas, balancing touch, balancing arm strength, and all. But he's also had a couple of very nice throws. There was a day where he threw 20-yard passes, a good amount of them, a couple to Brandon Aiyuk, one to Deebo Samuel. That was yesterday. He had a couple of good passes overall. And the point that I'm trying to stress right now, the 49ers are doing something different. They're wanting their quarterbacks to just try everything out. They're wanting their quarterbacks to really test themselves and don't care about the result. That's why Kyle Shanahan continuously says Trey Lance is having good practices, because it's not like you're throwing conservatively. You're testing everything, seeing how it works. That's why I even applauded Nate Sudfeld for trying to throw deep. There was one practice where Nate Sudfeld was horrendous horrendous completion percentage wise, 7 of 13, 3 interceptions, but he tried to throw it deep. I'm fine with that one practice being a wash because you can understand where Nate Sudfeld is throwing deep. He's just not that accurate, and that's fine. But overall, when you talk about statistics, you also have to provide context, and the context is Trey Lance is inconsistent, but he's also been fairly accurate deep when you take the overall numbers so far. It's just everywhere else where he kind of needs to improve. And also, I think he's going to develop more consistency when the offensive line develops more consistency.
Yeah, and I mean, to further on your theme of putting things into perspective, I think it was last season when Fred Warner was asked about Trey Lance. One of his criticisms of Trey Lance was that Trey in practice seemed a little hesitant to really take those shots, right? He didn't want to make a lot of mistakes. So his numbers always came back pretty good, but it was because he was taking more of the high percentage throws and not really showing what he was fully capable of as a quarterback. And that's probably like a confidence thing. Also just not being maybe as comfortable because he took a whole year off of football due to COVID. I think the fact that we are seeing Trey Lance even struggle a little bit, but it's because he's starting to take these chances and attempt everything that he's seeing on the field the defense give him. So it's still very early in camp. And I think one of the unfortunate parts of training camp, Rohan, is every day gets over analyzed. Every day, people have to write articles. People have to have their spicy titles. No pun intended with what the title of this video is. But so it gives a lot of pressure to athletes to not go out there and look bad, right? Because there's going to be a narrative that's created around it, especially with Trey Lance, who all offseason a narrative has been created. But I think the faithful should actually take, and it's kind of like what a lot of the guys in the comment section are saying, should actually take a lot of pride, or at least feel motivated by the fact that Trey Lance is still taking these shots, still attempting to get better at these weaknesses right now, because you want to get all of that done right now through practice versus being in the game and then being gun shy, being hesitant because you haven't really practiced it through training camp and in practice and whatnot. So I agree with you. I think the other thing you could take from this is the fact that he's attempting this shows a level of confidence that he's having this year that he didn't have last year, which is also a good sign.
Yeah, and I mean, when you talk about Trey Lance, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, right? He has struggled at times. That's what I prefaced the entirety of this of my speech on, right? But when you talk about Trey Lance, there are positives. There are things to be optimistic about. I just named it, the one part where you can be optimistic about, and that's the deep passing. The other area is Lance is a runner recently. So we saw Lance last year sometimes struggle with his running, and the reason was he was hesitant, right, to take off. He wanted to stay not only in the pocket, but even when he rolled out, he wanted to make a throw. He wanted to prove, right, that he's that pocket passer type of quarterback. But overall, Lance is really, really he's much better when he lets instinct override his practice, and that's what happened yesterday. Lance didn't think. When there was the lane, he took off and he ran. And when he takes off and runs in that capacity, whereas when he hesitates a little more, he's much faster. I realized how fast Trey Lance truly was yesterday. Whereas when I was watching him in person week 16 and watching him on film throughout the rest of the year last year, I thought he was I thought he was slower than I anticipated. Yesterday was what I expected with his speed. And that's also another positive because Trey Lance, I think, is finally getting comfortable. And really, I think it's fully dependent on the offensive line. Once the offensive line gets settled down and settled out, which it has been over the last couple of days, specifically over the last when pads have began, I think the offensive line has looked better, with its best day being yesterday. I think that Trey Lance will be the most comfortable that he'll be, and the 49ers offense will start moving because the run game will move. On top of that, because the run game is moving, the pass game will eventually move as well, you know?
Absolutely. So I guess the biggest thing, Rohan, to wrap up this topic, I know that there's been moments where he struggled. There's been moments where he's, wowed people. But are you seeing consistent progression day after day where you're seeing maybe Trey not make the same mistake multiple times and actually learn from maybe certain mistakes he's made earlier in practice or earlier in camp?
I can give one example. I mean, that's something that I think is still too early to tell, but one example in the real short term, Trey Lance's first two interceptions of camp. They were both the same exact interception. It was a Jimmy Garoppolo-esque interception. What do I mean by that? It was right. Lance just didn't see the rover right in the middle of the field about 10 yards deep on both plays. The first play was to Jimmy Ward. He was just standing there. Lance was trying to hit a crosser, threw the pass behind the crosser, and Jimmy Ward was just standing there over the middle of the field and intercepted the pass. The second one was the exact same play. Lance tried to hit Ray McLeod. The pass was behind McLeod. It went right to the middle of the field where Fred Warner was standing there. Lance didn't see him again. And I don't obviously you don't know. Is it a miscommunication? I just based on the throw, regardless of the miscommunication, based on the throw, Lance was in the wrong on both of those. One thing I haven't seen though is an interception of that like that any in the last couple of practices, right? Lance yesterday did have one interception, I believe. I'm not. I forget. I have to check my notes. But Lance didn't have a pick today. He was obviously 3 of 9, but had a touchdown. You can count it as 2. I counted it as 1. You can count it as 2. In the red zone, he was fairly efficient in the red zone. And the one thing I'm surprised not only about Lance but also about other players. These guys are quick learners. Like, I've seen a lot of improvement when one player was struggling one day and quickly turned it around the next day. And I'm not saying they've been consistent with that, but I've seen improvement which showcases potential of what they could be because they've shown positive reps.
I love it. And speaking to, what the rest of the team's looking like, obviously we went over someone like Brandon Aiyuk, wide receiver group, Trey Lance, quarterbacks, but overall, which position group out there looks the best so far?
When you talk about the best, I mean, there are a couple that stand out. Obviously, Brandon Aiyuk has been the best offensive player, but I don't think the wide receiver group, has been the best overall. The easy option is always the best team on paper, but I'm not going to go with that. I'm going to go with the secondary. The best group on paper is the defensive line, which has the best 2 players.
That's a good one, Eric.
Really
I like that one.
Really
I like that one.
Eric, you got my stamp of approval, man. But I'll go with the secondary because it's just been locked down. Charvarius Ward, Emmanuel Mosley had a great start to camp. Ward has been the best defensive player because I didn't count the defensive line over the first few days, right, because of no pads. And so Ward has been the best defensive player overall. And the secondary has looked really good. And it's not only Ward, right? Mosley has also looked really good on the outside. I think both of those guys, regardless of what happens, should stick on the outside at cornerback. They're just very, very good on the outside. And so the Mosley to the nickel spot, I mean, I wouldn't mind it, but I'd say Mosley right now, you got to keep him on the outside. But overall, the coverage, you've seen a couple of coverage sacks in general. Yesterday there were 3 coverage sacks overall. And the good part about coverage sacks, I think that it just showcases how the symbiotic relationship between the the defensive line and the secondary. How the defensive line helps the secondary out by getting there quick, while the secondary helps the defensive line out by holding coverage for 5-6 seconds so that the defensive line can get there and record the sack. So overall, I think the coverage has been phenomenal. It's been surprisingly really good, and that's something that I'm excited about because when you talk about what do you call it? When you talk about like this secondary compared to last year, you didn't think the secondary was going to jump up this well, especially after the amount of pass interferences last year. And many people wrote off Trevarius Ward, thought you're signing this guy over Stephon Gilmore, you're signing this guy over some of the other guys like J.C. Jackson. Trevarius Ward has looked the part. He's a $14 million corner.
I love it. And I love Swan Song. Sorry if I was laughing through your thing because he said I bought $200 on Ambry Thomas.
I saw the other one too.
Because you were so hyped. Definitely Swan Song, hold on to those. Ambry Thomas might not be a superstar quite yet, but in the next few years, I guarantee you he's going to get a lot of playing time and those cards will pay off. But yeah, and I mean, I think the biggest thing, Rohan, we obviously knew that a lot. We obviously saw this cornerback room as probably the best cornerback room that under the Kyle Shanahan era with the 49ers. And it's nice to see them actually producing, not only with their ability to do pass breakups, but like you were mentioning, we're seeing a lot more turnovers, which isn't something that is, I guess, prevalent in a 49ers, defense, is getting more interceptions. You talked about Ward and Mosley. Another discussion that we've had on this show is who is going to be the top 6, right? So can you mention maybe some other players out of that secondary that might be showing out that you feel like are possibly guys that will make the 53-man roster?
I'll start with a surprise because he's been the third best corner behind the two you mentioned. Deommodore Lenoir. Deommodore Lenoir has been cornerback number 3 for the 49ers. I don't even think it's close right now. I think Deommodore Lenoir has been by far the third best corner. He had a very good day today. He had 3 plays where he stood out. First, he was up against Danny Gray, the speedy receiver, and Lenoir isn't really a fast corner. He's more of he's a little bit of a slower corner with nickel type of build to him. But that doesn't stop Lenoir from playing on the outside. He had a good rep in one-on-ones, pretty much won the rep against Danny Gray. And then when you talk about him today in the 11-on-11 scrimmage, he had 2 good plays. First, had an interception off a drop pass from Taysier Mack, returned it for a touchdown to the end zone, and then he also had it was a PBU. It was a good play by Brock Purdy. Austin Mack was in coverage. It was a good play, good throw, and Lenoir had a PBU. He's been looking good. I was a little surprised, honestly, yesterday when Lenoir didn't get the first team reps opposite of Kadar Holman, but I think they wanted to keep Lenoir and Thomas together yesterday. And then the second surprise that I'll say behind them two, the 4th best corner, in my opinion, Tariq Castro-Fields. Wow. He's the rookie, the 6th round pick. He struggled in minicamp, but in my opinion, that was because he was playing slot, which I don't believe is his true position. His natural position is outside corner. He's been an outside corner, and he's been better than Ambry Thomas. And this is coming from a guy who also had high hopes for Ambry Thomas heading into 2022, just based on how he ended the year last year. But Thomas has struggled. He's had an up and down training camp, while Tariq Castro-Fields has looked better so far. Tariq Castro-Fields eclipsed him on the depth chart today. Thomas ran with the 3s. Castro-Fields ran with the 2s. So right now, if we're talking about those potential 6, I can't say with confirmation. But, the one other point that I want to put out, a lot of fans are going to like it. I didn't anticipate it just because it'd been so stuck with Denard with the 1s, Womack with the 2s, and then Johnson even at times with the 1s. Womack got first team reps today. He started in the nickel today, which was interesting to me. I don't know if that'll sustain. Maybe that changes on Thursday. Maybe that changes on Thursday or Friday. Because the 49ers had a lot of different changes today. Like I said, the one with Castro-Fields, they're moving a couple of guys today with the rest days and stuff like that. But Samuel Womack might be on the uptrend right now as he was slated to start in the nickel. But yeah, Castro-Fields look good. Those are the top 4 corners in my opinion right now.
That's awesome, and it's great to see these rookies coming out and performing even though they were like later round draft picks. So that's great. Looks like the cornerback room is in good shape. Whenever there's a best group, we also got to talk about, the group that may need the most work. So tell us a little bit about which position group is looking like maybe not, we don't want to say the weakest group, but let's just put it nicely and say the group that needs the most work.
Right. And I think that is a good way to put it, because right now there isn't really a weak group. This team is loaded from top to bottom, right? But if you talk about a group that needs the most work, it's especially after news that we heard today, the tight end group. Right now, there isn't a solidified tight end number 2. I tweeted this out earlier today. There was before, but Jordan Matthews got injured. It was a non-contact injury in a one-on-one drill. He landed awkwardly. He grimaced. It was looking like it was his left knee, maybe left leg. I didn't anticipate it'd be an ACL injury. I honestly thought it'd be like a sprain that hopefully he twisted his foot or something, because I didn't see exactly how it happened. But unfortunately, Jordan Matthews tore his ACL. I think it's honestly the tight end group, because you don't have a solidified guy right now behind George Kittle.
I know a lot of guys in the comment section are thinking, it's more of the offensive line. We have heard some reports about the offensive line. You mentioned a little bit that you've been seeing them actually get better. Talk to us a little bit. Give us a report about what you're seeing from the offensive line, because I think maybe most people are looking at that as where the 49ers need the most work.
Now, remember what I said. There isn't really a weak group on this team. And when I say the tight end group, I don't expect it to struggle, because it's got an all-pro at the position in the position group, right? And so preface that. I'm just talking about the overall depth. I think the offensive line struggles are a little bit overblown. Yesterday was the best day for the offensive line. I didn't really care about how they played today because of no pads. I mean, obviously, I'm keeping a close check. I thought they played good for the fact that they had no pads today, because you saw pressure, but you didn't really see too many sacks, right? I think there was one sack really right on my mind that I talked about with the offensive line. That was Kevin Givens beating Jake Brendel for a sack on Trey Lance today. But yesterday was the best day. And this is an issue that I've really hammered on my streams: continuity. I like the 49ers have been flipping guys in and out, because Trent Williams and Mike McGlinchey have been limited, which means that they too haven't really played too much with the first team offensive line. When they've been out, the offensive line has looked good. Why? Because not only do they look really good, right? Especially McGlinchey. McGlinchey has been a surprise. He had a really good practice yesterday against Nick Bosa, especially. I'll talk about that in a minute. But the guards have to worry about the backup tackles when they're on the field, but don't necessarily have to worry and can just do their jobs when the top 2 tackles are on the field. On top of that, when you talk about the center position, it's been a rotation. I honestly thought Brunskill had won the job after yesterday. He took a majority of the reps, and the offensive line, like I said, looked the best it's looked. But Brendel took the first team reps today. That was a bit of a surprise to me. I personally am not a huge fan of this. I understand a competition, but for Trey Lance's sake, I don't think that is the best option, because the 3 interior guys are all new. They need to find a way to work together. The cohesion is important. And I'm not only talking about pass protection. In the run game too, on Monday and on today's Wednesday, right? Yeah, on Monday, the offensive line, the running outside worked when pads first came on, but the interior rush, the zone run inside, did not work. On Tuesday, though, when you had a little more continuity with Brunskill taking a majority of the reps, there were good runs for 5-6 yards on the inside. And then today, you had the swap. And so, again, it's without pads, so you take it with a grain of salt, but there were a lot more 0, 1, and 2-yard rushes compared to Tuesday. And so that's the one thing. I'm not a huge fan at all, really, at this moment about this, especially this deep into camp. I hope the situation gets resolved sooner than later, because for Trey Lance's sake, because they protect different in pass protection, which is huge. I've hammered that point as well, and also in the run game.
So I have 2 questions to follow with what you just said. So you talked about Trent Williams and McGlinchey both being limited. Is that like a coach's decision just to not overwork them this early in camp, or are they nursing injuries right now?
Coach's decision. So Both of them. So remember, Trent Williams did not practice in the first part of training camp because he had a birth of his child, so he was not present. He showed up, I think, 2 or 3 days late. And McGlinchey is nursing obviously the injury, right?
Mm-hmm.
He looks healthy. He's looked good, but they're ramping him up. They gave him, I believe, a rest day. They gave him a rest day yesterday. And then they gave Kinlaw a rest day on Monday. They gave him a rest day yesterday. They've been giving a lot of vets rest days. Today was Bosa and Kittle and Drake Greenlaw. So they've been giving rest days to these guys, but they've been limited because Williams hasn't played too much, and then McGlinchey obviously coming back from injury. So, but I did the one positive. I talked about 3 guys, Kinlaw being the third. The one positive is that Kinlaw, who was there today, he got the biggest ramp up he's seen. He was playing a lot today with the ones, and that's a good sign.
Awesome. And then my second question is, you talked about the interior, right? So we know the position at center is either going to be Brunskill or Brendel, more than likely. Aaron Banks seems to be the left guard, but it seems like they're trying a few different people at the right guard position. Can you talk about who you think is going to actually end up being the right guard, and also maybe give us an update on what you've seen out of Aaron Banks now that he's like slotted in as the left guard?
Yeah, I have not actually seen anybody apart from Spencer Burford on the right guard side. There have been a couple of guys sliding in for right guard number 2, but to be honest, there is no competition at right guard right now. The guys at RG2 right now really aren't competing. Jason Poe hasn't looked that great. He's looked a little bit overwhelmed at right guard. He was relegated elsewhere as well. He's played in a couple of different positions. Keaton Sutherland was the second guy to play at right guard. He won't make the team. The third guy was Colton McKivitz, but he also has played time at tackle. He will make the team, but I don't think he's in competition. I think it's honestly locked at Burford, which is what makes the entire offensive line debacle a little more interesting. The center position right now is where it's a little more confusing. I personally right now think Daniel Brunskill will win it, although my views changed a little bit today after seeing Brendel back with the ones after Brunskill's strong day. So I'm not exactly sure. That's the biggest question mark right now.
And then can you give us an update on what you've seen from Banks? Obviously, last year he was playing more right guard, didn't have the best training camp, obviously didn't get much playing time, came back, his body looks a lot better, been getting some high praise from his teammates, namely Trent Williams. But what are you seeing on the field from him? How is he looking? And does it look like, that left guard position is his job basically at this point?
Yes. So talking about Aaron Banks, he's had up and down days. I think he's been the most consistent. If we're being honest, I think he's been the most consistent interior offensive lineman. I think he's been the best so far, but it doesn't mean that he hasn't been doing great days. Like he's had some rough days. There was a day where he was beat consistently by Kevin Givens. And remember, Kevin Givens, he's actually a good player, but he's a backup on this team, so you don't necessarily want him to consistently beat a starting left guard. I think he'll do better with Trent Williams, which is why I'm still waiting to necessarily bring it out. Burford has had a couple of good days. It's like everybody has had good and bad days. So I can't necessarily say definitively that Aaron Banks has been the best of the 3. I think they're all still improving, but it's not that I don't have hope. I still think that this offensive line is going to be fine.
Okay. And that's great to see. Obviously, that's been one of the biggest question marks, and it's good to see that we're actually progressing in the right direction. Speaking of the offensive line, obviously they're very, very important, not only to protect the quarterback, but also to help out the running game. And we all know that Elijah Mitchell is going to be running back 1, but we didn't know really who's going to be slotted in as RB2 to take away some of the, relentless workload that he got last season. I've been hearing a lot of good things about Trey Sermon. I think you and I both really felt like this is going to be his chance to really step up this year. Didn't have the best rookie season, obviously, showed some flashes, but didn't get a lot of playing opportunity, was a little nicked up. Seems like Rohan, he's changed his body composition, and also tell us a little bit from what you're seeing as far as his ability on the field. And do you think he's solidifying himself as the second running back behind Elijah Mitchell?
Trey Sermon has been a positive so far in camp. I'll be honest. Yeah, I think he's looked good. Today was one of his like kind of slim down days, and it's not necessarily because Sermon looked bad. It's just the carries necessarily weren't there. I talked about how there was no pads, so you saw a lot of smaller carries. It's been running backs in a way have been rotating. It's been very interesting. Before today, I would have told you that Jordan Mason had the edge right now on RB4, with Sermon being 2 and TDP being 3. But the rotations kind of switch a lot. Today, Jeff Wilson Jr. got back in the mix after an undisclosed injury. It took him out of team drills 2 days for 2 straight days, and it was him and Sermon taking all of the first team reps. Tyreen Davis Price has had a good day. He had a good day today, especially finding the edge. The one thing is, can he be consistent against the first team defense? Because he played all of his reps, almost all of his reps against the second team defense today with Wilson back in the mix. I personally haven't been too impressed with Wilson so far, but he had a good day today as well. He showed a little more explosiveness than he's shown in previous days with some of his cuts. It's just, can he be consistent? But if Wilson is good, he might honestly compete because I think Hasty has also looked good at times as well. In my opinion, I think he's limited, but he's good at what he does in the limited range. So to me, it's like, do the 49ers reach for potential with Jordan Mason? Because he's been a good receiver in Mason, and he's also been a strong physical runner, which might be what they need this year with this offensive line on the interior still working things out. And so to me, I think Sermon has looked good. I think TDP has looked good at times. He had a bit of a rough day yesterday, but finished really strong. And I think Jordan Mason has looked good. But overall, the one thing that I'm kind of getting back to is this running back group is going to be better than last year because they're just names, and there's not names. There's just bodies. There's healthy bodies here. And like when you talk about these players having good and bad days, what does Kyle Shanahan do? He rides with the hot hand. And so if players can have good days while other players are having bad days, you just ride with the hot hand and let it ride. And so that's something that I'm optimistic about this year. Although I do think Elijah Mitchell right now is the clear-cut RB1.
And Niners Warriors asked, did anyone tell the media why Jeff Wilson was out for 2 days? Knee, personal stuff. Rohan just mentioned that it was an undisclosed injury. They didn't necessarily say what that injury was, but it was due to injury, not the personal stuff. And then Fernando has a question. Who has been better, Mason or Sermon?
I would say Trey Sermon, the only reason being he's got more play. Mason has been good, but he hasn't had the reps that Sermon's had. And I also factor Sermon's reps more because he's gone against the higher level teams, right? Mason hasn't gotten reps with the first team. He's gotten a couple of reps with the second team, but primarily right with the third team with Brock Purdy there. And so that's where I factor in his reps a little less. Sermon has been running with the 1s and the 2s. So I'd say Sermon has looked good. He looks rejuvenated, but I'm not counting out Mason. He's been the best receiver in camp so far out of any back.
And Fernando also says it seems like Anthony Lynn looks like he's going to make our running backs catch more passes in the backfield, which is kind of why you're mentioning Mason so much. But I do want to kind of stick a little bit more to Trey Sermon because I'm a homer for Trey Sermon. I really liked him coming out of college. I thought that was a great pickup by the 49ers. And, we really need to see him turn up, I guess, in this season to really justify that draft pick. Can you tell us where you're seeing maybe him improve from last season? He didn't have necessarily the best training camp last season. This camp, it seems like he's doing a lot better. Is it more his body composition, Rohan? Is he hitting the holes harder? Or, what exactly is, I guess, why we're hearing so many good things about Trey Sermon out of this camp?
I think it's honestly because Sermon, he understands what is required in the NFL now. Last year, I'd expect Sermon came in 3rd round pick. I expect he probably thought things were going to be handed to him because he was RB2, right? Because at least in terms of positional value, because it was Mitchell 1, Mostert and Wilson were not healthy. So Sermon probably thought things were going to be handed to him. So I don't think he was necessarily in shape how the 49ers wanted him to be. This year, though, I think that's off the field stuff. If we're talking on the field, downfield runner. Sermon has finally mastered the one cut downfield run type of thing rather than trying to dance a little too much, right? That's one thing Sermon can do in college, but it doesn't work in the NFL. You got to be a downfield runner, get as much yardage as possible while making cuts when necessary, and trust yourself rather than trust your moves. You got to trust instinct more than moves, because while your moves might be good, this is a whole new level and a whole new challenge. And that's what Sermon has been doing better. He's been cutting, and even when it's not there eventually, I still think that Sermon is making the right reads, which is why I'm a little more optimistic, because I didn't necessarily think he held that vision during times last year.
I love it. I love it. And then we'll get you out on this one, Rohan. Obviously, we're talking a lot about guys that, been on the team, that are, more pros or been in the league for a long time. But this is our first chance to really see how these rookies are doing with all of the pros and the stars that we have and talent that we have on this team overall. So can you talk a little bit about, which rookies are impressing you the most, and give us a little rundown as far as which rookies you think are going to make the biggest impact this year?
Yeah, so I mean, I got to start right from the top. Drake Jackson, he's impressed. He has impressed so far. That's a good sign for 49er fans. Jackson, obviously, being our second-round pick. People questioned because there's so much depth. Will Jackson be able to get a chance to compete? I believe he will. He's had 3 really good days in camp. 2 really good days and then 1 good day. I thought today was a solid day, but I thought yesterday was a good day, and I thought Thursday of last week was a really good day. Yesterday, he just schooled Alfredo Gutierrez a lot. Gutierrez is a big body, right? So he's definitely he's when you talk about the potential, he could have it, but right now he's just not refined as much with pass protection, and so Drake Jackson beat him a lot. He got 4 pressures on the day on Gutierrez, 2 sacks overall, and then beat Sam Schluter and got a TFL in the run game. So Jackson overall, great day for him. And so to me,
can you talk a little bit about how, because one of the knocks on Drake Jackson, well, his strength was going to be athleticism and his speed rush. One of his knocks is that he doesn't have much of a refined game past the bull rush or the speed rush. Are we seeing just that is just beating people through his insane athleticism, or is he starting to develop some moves to help him win some of these battles?
That is a very good question, because honestly, in one-on-ones, Jackson has struggled a bit. Justin Skule held him up, and that wasn't the case during Thursday when Jackson beat Skule. And so to me, I think it is right now a little more athleticism than refinement in pass technique. But honestly, I don't think it matters that much. I think his athleticism is just so genuinely rare that it can solely beat players, which is why I want to see more reps against the first team. Today he had a nice rep against Mike McGlinchey. I see a talk about his bend in the chat. Yeah, it was purely because of his bend. He got past McGlinchey on the outside, and that speed got there. So one thing offensive linemen try and do is drive defensive linemen outside so that quarterbacks can step in the pocket. However, if you try and drive Jackson outside, he's just quicker than you, that he can beat you on the outside, which is where that athleticism comes in. And that's why people take chances on players with such great traits. And so to me, Jackson has looked good. He hasn't had too much run with the first team, but he has actually seen reps with the first team. He saw some on Friday. He saw some today, even beating McGlinchey, that was, of course. And I want to see how does he play a little more against the first team, because he's played very well against the backups. And a guy like Kerry Hyder, who's run against the first team, hasn't really necessarily played that well.
So you talked about Drake, obviously second-round draft pick. Who are some other rookies that are showing out? I know you mentioned some of the guys in the secondary. We obviously have TDP there as well in the 3rd round. Burford obviously is looking like he's going to gain a starting role. So seems like a lot of these rookies are playing very well, or at least going to be productive players. Talk to us about who else has shined for you.
Yeah, so I mean, we, like you said, we talked about Jackson, we talked about TDP, we talked about Spencer Burford, who's looked fine on a couple of days, not so fine on other days, but still he's a good player, good athlete, and I think he'll end up being a good starter. So that was another thing. Those 3. Who else? We talked about Jordan Mason. He's been the star of the undrafted rookie show. And I think honestly, those are the four really that have been impressing. There have been a couple that have struggled, right? Oh, and Tariq Castro-Fields. Tariq Castro-Fields has impressed according to 6th-round standards, already being elevated to the backup level cornerbacks on this team.
That's great. So, I mean, it seems like, once again, the 49ers have done a good job drafting players. All of these guys seem like they're going to make the 53-man roster and probably get some playing time in either as starting roles like Burford or, in backup duty or depth positions as well. I didn't ask you, I didn't have this on the list, but it is something I'm interested in. Obviously, with Hufanga moving in next to Jimmy Ward, what has that safety duo look like? As far as you talked a lot about the cornerbacks and how they're dominating, but how are the safeties looking? Does it look like that's Hufanga's job to lose at this time, or is there any other safeties that are coming out looking like they could compete for that position next to Jimmy Ward?
I don't think Hufanga loses his job. He's looked good. And when you talk about it, I mean, he's good in his role, right? Hufanga is going to be a guy who doesn't necessarily have to worry about deep end a lot, right? In sets, that's going to be Jimmy Ward's job when them two are out, or even a third safety's job if they're out. But Hufanga and his reps, right? We talk about one-on-ones. He started both days with strong reps. He had a great rep on George Kittle yesterday in one-on-ones, deflecting the pass at the end while keeping with them. And then today he started the day against Tyler Kroft and had a great rep as well. He started the one-on-one sessions with 2 great reps. He's had a PBU in practice. He's had an interception off Trey Lance. He started training camp so far pretty strong. And I think that that's only going to elevate when you talk about the running game, because Hufanga's presence in the running game, really the running game hasn't necessarily gotten to the depths of it. And I think against other teams, Hufanga is going to be more present in the running game. But to me, I don't think it's that other players are going to take his spot necessarily. I think instead, you might see some 3 safety sets. The 49ers have already debuted it because what happens when you play cover 1? You have to depend on your linebackers to cover, which isn't always a good sign, especially with linebackers that you don't anticipate covering. So instead, drop a safety down. Safeties can sometimes guard tight ends, and I think Hufanga has shown that he can at times. So you can drop him in the box. I know Dante Johnson has gotten run with 3 safety sets, but the most run has been to Tarvarius Moore. And with his athleticism, and maybe he does take bad angles, right? He takes bad angles sometimes in the run game. I haven't seen too much yet of him in the run game, but he's taken bad angles before. He sometimes, does miss up in coverage, but that athleticism is rare, and he's had a solid start to camp, obviously with the 2 interception day. So you might see 3 safety sets where Moore trickles in as well.
I love it. And Brian Rivera, Rohan doing a great job, most comprehensive cap coverage for real. And Rohan has been doing an amazing job being at all these days of training camp. He's been writing, really great articles for WebZone, and he also has his own channel. So guys that are in the chat that haven't, subscribed to Rohan, his link is in the description. It literally takes less than 10 seconds to click the link and subscribe to his channel. He's been doing reports daily on immediately what he's been reacting to, what he's seeing on the field. And you can tell how in-depth he breaks it. He's really thoughtful about what he says. So please go support him. Rohan, that pretty much wraps up the show. I know you've been doing a lot of articles, you're tweeting a lot, and also doing these videos. But can you talk a little bit about your schedule for the rest of the week and talk to these guys about where they can find you?
Yeah. And first of all, my bad on this lighting. I did not anticipate it getting so dark so early. So I rushed in trying to figure out this setup. That's why it's a little dark right now. But don't worry about it. I am creeping in the locker room like an obsessed fan or like an obsessed reporter. But thank you guys so much, obviously, for your comments. I've always enjoyed it. And on Twitter, one thing I do is if you drop a question at one point in the day, I go through Twitter and I go through all of my mentions answering your guys' questions because I really appreciate just the conversation with you guys. You guys can find me on my Twitter at Rohan Chakravarthi. You can also find me on my YouTube channel, like Sunil mentioned. I'm doing daily streams after practice and streams like this outside where we go a little more in depth into the topics that I haven't really talked about. And so it's important that you guys subscribe to my channel, but also subscribe to guys like Sunil's channel channel because his content is also popping off as well. Obviously, we're going to be there. And the surprise that I wrote on Twitter, you guys are going to have to wait until tomorrow. I am not going to spoil the surprise. I mean, you guys got blessed last time. The surprise last time that I dropped was my Jimmy Garoppolo story that me and my guy Marco Martinez broke. This surprise, I don't know if you guys are going to be as happy in that regard, but you're going to be happy in other regards. So be sure to stay tuned tomorrow on Twitter.
Nice little tease to end the show. Guys, the chat section was extremely active this show. Thank you so much for joining in. You guys really make the show easier and more fun to do on a daily basis. Always thank you to Rohan for bringing the fire and making this show what it is. Like I always say, stay safe, stay hydrated. And we'll talk very, very soon, guys. Me personally, I think I might be on Wayne Brady's show in the next couple of days. Might be going live, maybe later, maybe even with Rohan again on his channel sometime this week. But love you guys. Have a great night, and we'll talk again.